And I'm Madison, 28 years old, living in Boston, with a view of the harbour from my new home. 10 years ago, I was just a terrified college freshman, sobbing in my dorm room after my parents told me not to come home for Christmas. All because of a lie my sister told. Now I have the career, the house, and the peace I fought for. Meanwhile, my parents lost everything. Their desperate call came last Tuesday, asking for the help they once refused to give me. Before I tell you how I went from homeless at 18 to owning my dream home while my parents lost everything, tell me where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if family drama stories resonate with you. Growing up in Minneapolis, we were the picture-perfect family on Maple Street. Our two-story colonial with the white picket fence and carefully tended garden was the envy of the neighborhood. Every Sunday we sat in the same pew at church, dressed in our finest clothes, smiling for everyone to see. My father Thomas made sure we projected the right image. Madison, fix your hair before we leave. We have a reputation to maintain. He'd say, eyeing my appearance critically, even though I was only 12. My father ran a successful construction company building luxury homes across the city. Tall and imposing, with salt and pepper hair, he commanded respect wherever he went. At home, his word was law. My mother, Karen, a kindergarten teacher with a soft voice and softer spine, never contradicted him. She'd perfected the art of keeping peace by keeping quiet. "Your father works so hard for this family," she'd whisper when I questioned his strict rules. "The least we can do is follow his lead." Then there was my sister Amber, 2 years younger than me, with her golden curls and sweet smile that charmed everyone. She was the baby of the family, the treasured one. While I was expected to excel in everything Amber could do no wrong in our father's eyes. "Look how well Amber listens," he'd say, when I expressed an opinion different from his. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Our home operated on a clear hierarchy, with my father at the top, my mother as his loyal supporter, Amber as the golden child, and me as the one who never quite fit the mold. I learned early on that academic achievement was my only pathway to approval. So I threw myself into my studies, collecting perfect grades like armor against disappointment. By 16, I had my future mapped out. I would attend a prestigious university, preferably far from Minneapolis, build a career in technology, and create a life where I could make my own decisions. My guidance counselor encouraged me to aim high, impressed by my perfect GPA and coding skills I'd taught myself. "Madison, with your abilities, schools like MIT and Stanford are within reach. Mrs. Peterson told me during our college planning meeting, you should apply early." When I brought home brochures for out-of-state universities, my father's face darkened. "Absolutely not. You'll attend Minnesota State like your cousins. It's good enough for this family and it's close to home." "But Dad, with my grades and test scores, I could get scholarships to top programs." I argued, my voice shaking slightly. "This isn't up for discussion, Madison. This family stays together. End of story." That night, I cried silently into my pillow, feeling the walls of my future closing in. But something hardened inside me too. I began applying to colleges in secret using Mrs. Peterson's office computer during lunch breaks. I requested fee waivers and worked extra hours at my part-time job at the local library to pay for application expenses my parents wouldn't cover. During this time, Amber was starting her sophomore year of high school. While I maintained my straight-A student persona, she began showing small signs of rebellion. Nothing serious at first. Staying out past curfew by 15 minutes, wearing makeup a bit heavier than allowed texting during family dinner. "She's just going through a phase," Mum would say, smoothing things over. Dad would frown but let it slide. If I had done the same things at her age, I would have been grounded for weeks. When my MIT acceptance letter arrived that spring, with a substantial scholarship offer, I hid it for 3 days, terrified of my father's reaction. Finally, on a Sunday after church, when he seemed in a particularly good mood, I showed him the letter. I got in Dad, and they're offering to cover most of the tuition. The argument that followed lasted for hours. He yelled, I cried. Mum wrung her hands helplessly. Eventually faced with the reality of the scholarship money, and perhaps realizing I was old enough to make this decision, regardless of his input, he relented with cold fury. "Fine. Go. But don't expect us to bail you out when things get tough so far from home." The summer before college was tense. Dad barely spoke to me. Mum tried to bridge the gap, helping me shop for dorm essentials while whispering apologies for his behavior. Amber seemed confused by the conflict, sometimes supporting me, sometimes siding with our father, depending on which way the wind blew. On move-in day, Dad stayed home. Only Mom and Amber drove me to the airport, hugging me tightly before I boarded the plane to Boston. "He'll come around," Mum promised. Just give him time. I didn't know then that time would only widen the gap between us, or that the worst betrayal wasn't my father's disapproval, but what awaited me 3 months later. My first semester at MIT was everything I'd dreamed of and more. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who thought like me, who valued knowledge and innovation above conformity. My roommate Jessica from California introduced me to sushi and hiking. My study group included students from 3 different countries. My computer science professor praised my coding projects and suggested I apply for a research position the following semester. I called home every Sunday night, maintaining the family tradition even from a distance. Mum always answered, eager to hear about my classes and new friends. Amber would get on the line to tell me about high school drama and ask for advice about which colleges to consider. Dad would briefly say hello, his voice still carrying that edge of disappointment, before handing the phone back to Mum. Despite the lingering tension with my father, things seemed to be settling into a new normal. I made plans to fly home for Christmas break, saving up for the plane ticket from my work-study job at the campus computer lab. I bought small gifts for everyone. A Boston snow globe for Mum, a Red Sox cap for Dad, even though he was a Twins fan, and silver earrings for Amber. 2 weeks before finals, around 11 at night, my phone rang. Seeing Mum's name on the screen, I felt a flutter of anxiety. She never called this late. "Hello," I answered, stepping into the hallway so as not to disturb Jessica. "Madison." Her voice was barely recognizable through her sobs. "Mum, what's wrong? Is everyone okay?" "It's Amber. She's pregnant." The word hung in the air between us. Amber, my 16-year-old sister, pregnant. "Oh my God, is she all right? How far along is she? Does she know what she wants to do?" "Your father is beside himself," Mum continued as if she hadn't heard my questions. "We just found out today. She's been hiding it for months, apparently. Almost 4 months along already." My mind raced. 4 months meant Amber must have gotten pregnant shortly after I left for college. "Mum, listen, I'll come home right away. I can take my finals early or make arrangements with my professors. Amber needs support right now, and so do you and Dad." There was a pause filled only with my mother's uneven breathing. "Madison," she said finally, her voice strange and distant. "Your father thinks, he says you influenced her by leaving." "What? That doesn't make any sense." "He says if you hadn't been so rebellious going against his wishes, Amber wouldn't have thought it was okay to be promiscuous." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Mom, that's ridiculous. My going to college has nothing to do with Amber getting pregnant. How could he possibly blame me for this? He says you set a bad example, breaking the family apart, defying him. That's not fair. I worked hard to get here. I'm doing well in my classes." "How is that setting a bad example?" I heard muffled voices in the background, then the unmistakable sound of my father's heavy footsteps approaching the phone. "Madison," his voice was cold with fury, "this is your doing. You abandoned this family to pursue your selfish ambitions, and look what's happened. Your sister looked up to you, and you showed her that defying parents leads to freedom. Well, this is the result. Dad, please. This isn't about me. Amber needs our support right now, not blame and judgment. I'll come home tomorrow and we can figure this out as a family." "No." The word was like ice. "Don't come home for Christmas. You're not welcome here." "What?" I felt like the floor was dropping beneath me. "Dad, you can't mean that. I've never been more serious in my life. You made your choice when you left this family. Now we're dealing with the consequences." "Let me talk to Amber, please." I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Amber doesn't need your influence right now. She needs her parents to guide her back to the right path." "Dad, please don't do this." The line went dead. He had hung up on me. I stood in the hallway of my dorm phone clutched in my trembling hand, trying to process what had just happened. My sister was pregnant, my father blamed me, and I had just been told not to come home. Ever. I tried calling back immediately, but no one answered. I sent text messages to both my mother and Amber. No response. Around 2 a.m., physically and emotionally exhausted, I crawled back into my dorm room and collapsed onto my bed, muffling my sobs in my pillow so as not to wake Jessica. How could my father possibly blame me for Amber's pregnancy? What kind of twisted logic made that connection? And how could my mother allow him to cut me off like this? As the shock began to wear off, a cold, hard realization settled in. My father had been looking for a reason to punish me for leaving, and Amber's situation gave him the perfect opportunity. Closer. For the next 3 days, I existed in a fog, attending classes but retaining nothing. I called home repeatedly, morning, afternoon, evening, but no one answered. I left voicemails that grew increasingly desperate. I sent emails. I even tried reaching out to neighbors and family friends on social media, but no one responded. It was as if an invisible wall had been erected overnight between me and everyone from my previous life. On the fourth day after that devastating call, my phone rang. Amber's name flashed on the screen. I nearly dropped the phone in my haste to answer. Amber, thank God. Are you okay? What's happening? Her voice came through small and broken. Maddie, I'm so sorry. Sorry for what? Are you all right, the baby? I did something terrible. She was crying now. When Mum and Dad found out I was pregnant, they went ballistic. Dad was screaming, saying I'd ruined my life, ruined the family name. I was so scared, Maddie. What happened, Amber? They kept asking who the father was, but I wouldn't tell them. It's Jason from my biology class. We've been dating secretly because Dad would never approve. Then Dad started saying, this would never have happened if you hadn't left, if you hadn't filled my head with ideas about independence. My stomach clenched. And I told them you knew about Jason, that I'd told you about him before you left for college, and you said I should make my own decisions about dating regardless of what Dad thought. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Amber, why would you say that? It's not true. I didn't even know you were seeing anyone. I know. Her sobs grew louder. I was terrified, Maddie. Dad was looming over me, looking like he might explode. I just wanted to deflect some of his anger. I never thought he would cut you off completely. I didn't think he'd forbid you from coming home. I'm so sorry. I sat down heavily on my bed trying to process this new information. My sister had thrown me under the bus to save herself, and I was paying the price. What's happening now? I asked, my voice hollow. They've taken my phone and laptop. I'm only calling because I borrowed my friend Lily's phone during lunch break. Dad's making arrangements for me to stay with Aunt Patricia in Rochester until the baby comes. They're talking about adoption. Do you want to keep the baby? I asked. I don't know. I'm so confused and scared. Jason doesn't even know yet. His family is moving to Chicago next month. Amber, listen to me. This is your body and your baby. Yeah. You have options, and you should be the one making this decision, not Dad. I don't have any power here, Maddie. I'm 16. They control everything. The hopelessness in her voice broke my heart. I'm going to try to come home okay. We'll figure this out together. Dad won't let you in the house. He told everyone at church that you encouraged me to be promiscuous. The humiliation burned through me. My reputation in the community I grew up in destroyed by my father's lies and my sister's cowardice. I have to go, Amber whispered suddenly. Lily's waiting. I'll try to call again when I can. After the call ended, I sat motionless on my bed staring at the wall. My roommate Jessica found me like that when she returned from class. Madison, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I turned to her, my face wet with tears I hadn't realized I was shedding. My family just disowned me. Jessica, bless her heart, didn't ask questions right away. She simply sat beside me and put her arm around my shoulders. When I finally managed to tell her everything, she was outraged on my behalf. That's insane. Your father is punishing you for his inability to parent your sister, and your sister lied about you to save herself. That's so messed up. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Finals are next week. Christmas break starts in 10 days. I was supposed to go home, but now... Jessica squeezed my shoulder. You'll come home with me. My parents won't mind. We have plenty of room, and no one should be alone during the holidays. That's how I ended up spending Christmas with Jessica's family in Connecticut. Her parents welcomed me warmly, never prying, but making it clear I was welcome. Watching their family dynamic, the easy conversations, the mutual respect, the way disagreements were discussed openly rather than suppressed or punished, was both healing and painful. It showed me what family could be highlighting everything mine wasn't. When we returned to campus in January, I had a meeting scheduled with my academic advisor to plan my spring courses. As we reviewed my schedule, he frowned at his computer screen. Madison, it appears there's an issue with your tuition payment for this semester. The financial aid office is showing your account as delinquent. My blood ran cold. That can't be right. My scholarship covers most of it, and my parents... I trailed off as realization dawned. My parents had been paying the portion not covered by scholarship, the relatively small but still significant amount that made it possible for me to attend MIT. I ran to the financial aid office where my fears were confirmed. The payment that should have been processed in December was never received. With shaking hands, I called home. To my surprise, my father answered, Madison. His voice was flat, emotionless. Dad, there's a problem with my tuition payment. The school says it wasn't received. That's not a problem. That was a decision. I gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean? We will not be supporting your education any longer. You made your choice to leave this family. Now you can figure out how to pay for that choice. Dad, please, don't do this. I've worked so hard. I'm doing well here. You should have thought about that before you encouraged your sister to disregard family values. I never did. That Amber admitted she lied about that. There was a pause. Your mother would like to speak with you. My mother's tremulous voice came on the line. Madison, honey, maybe you should come home. Attend community college here. Be part of the family again. Before I could respond, I heard my father's voice in the background. Karen, enough. Then he was back on the phone. The decision is final, Madison. Good luck with your future endeavours. The line went dead. I stood in the financial aid office, phone in hand, the full weight of my situation crashing down on me. At 18 years old, I was effectively on my own. No family support, emotional or financial. My carefully planned future suddenly hanging by a thread. The financial aid officer, a kind woman named Mrs. Rodriguez, saw my distress and ushered me into her private office. Through tears, I explained my situation. She listened without judgment, then began outlining my options. You can apply for additional loans. Your academic record is excellent, which helps. We can arrange an emergency work-study position. And there are hardship scholarships you might qualify for, given these extreme circumstances. By the end of that day, I had a patchwork plan to stay afloat. More debt than I'd ever imagined taking on. A campus job that would require 20 hours a week on top of my already demanding course load. A tiny studio apartment off campus that cost less than the dorms, but was a 40-minute walk from classes. As I signed form after form, a strange calm settled over me. I was no longer the daughter trying to please while maintaining independence. I was simply Madison, responsible for herself alone, charting a course through waters my parents had made unnecessarily treacherous. That night, I changed my social media settings to private and turned off notifications from hometown connections. If my family and community could discard me so easily based on lies, I would build something new, something better, something mine. The next 2 years were the hardest of my life. I worked multiple jobs while maintaining a full course load. Weekdays were spent rushing between classes, my position at the computer lab, and evening shifts waitressing at a local diner. Weekends I picked up tutoring gigs, helping high school students prepare for AP exams and SATs. Some nights I got only 4 hours of sleep before starting all over again. My social life consisted mainly of study groups, which served the dual purpose of academic support and human connection. But among those study partners, I found true friendship. Jasmine, a brilliant physics major with a loud laugh and zero tolerance for self-pity. Raj, a quiet engineering student who would bring me coffee during late-night study sessions without being asked. And David, whose family owned a small grocery store and would send him back to campus with food packages he generously shared. They became my chosen family, the people who showed up when it mattered. When I caught the flu sophomore year and couldn't work for a week, they took turns bringing me soup and medicine. When my laptop died right before a major project was due, Jasmine lent me hers without hesitation. When I couldn't afford to fly anywhere for spring break, David's family welcomed me into their home in Rhode Island. About 8 months after being cut off, I received an unexpected call from Amber. She was staying with our aunt in Rochester as planned and was now 7 months pregnant. I'm supposed to give the baby up for adoption, she told me, her voice small and resigned. Dad found a couple from church. They're nice, I guess. Is that what you want? I asked carefully. Her silence spoke volumes. It doesn't matter what I want. I'm a minor. Dad has all the legal forms. Amber, I'm so sorry. Despite everything, my heart ached for my sister. She was still so young, caught in our father's iron grip. I told them the truth, she said suddenly, about the lie. I told Mom that you never knew about Jason, that you never encouraged me to date behind their backs. What did she say? She cried, said she believed me. But Dad, her voice trailed off. Let me guess. Dad said I was still to blame somehow. He said you abandoned the family and that was enough. That your leaving created the environment for me to rebel. She paused. I'm so sorry, Maddie. This is all my fault. If I hadn't lied... We both know Dad would have found another reason to punish me for leaving. I said, surprised by the clarity with which I now saw our family dynamic. I was never going to be forgiven for choosing my own path. After that conversation, I decided to make one last attempt at reconciliation. I wrote a long email to both my parents explaining that I knew about Amber's lie, but also expressing my willingness to move forward. I told them about my struggles and successes at MIT, hoping they might feel some pride in what their daughter was accomplishing despite the obstacles. The response when it came was brief and crushing. Madison, we appreciate your honesty, but feel it comes too late. The damage to this family has been done. We wish you well in your educational pursuits, but think it best we all move forward separately. Dad and Mum, the finality of it struck me like a physical blow. They were really cutting me out of their lives permanently over pride and misplaced blame. The injustice burned, but beneath the pain something hardened in me. A determination to succeed not despite them, but without them entirely. I graduated from MIT with honors, my chosen family cheering loudly from the audience. No biological relatives attended. The mixture of triumph and loneliness that day was bittersweet, but I focused on the triumph. I had done this. Me alone against the odds. My first job was at a Boston tech startup developing educational software. The salary wasn't impressive by industry standards, but after years of scraping by, it felt like wealth. I rented a decent apartment with a real bedroom instead of a studio. I started paying down my student loans. I began building an emergency fund determined never to be financially vulnerable again. During those first post-college years, I rarely thought about my family. I learned through mutual connections that Amber had given her baby up for adoption as planned, finished high school, and married young, to a boy our father approved of naturally. She was living in California now, far from Minneapolis, which made me wonder if she too had felt the need to escape, albeit in a more acceptable way. I sought therapy to process the abandonment and betrayal. My therapist, Dr. Chen, helped me understand the toxic family dynamics I'd grown up with. Your father exhibits classic controlling behavior, she explained. When you removed yourself from his control by going to college, he needed to reassert dominance. Your sister's pregnancy gave him the perfect opportunity to punish you in a way that seemed justified to him. But why did my mother go along with it? She knew Amber was lying. Your mother is what we call an enabler. She's learned that supporting your father's decisions, no matter how unreasonable, is safer than opposing him. It's a survival mechanism in an unhealthy power dynamic. These insights didn't erase the pain, but they helped me contextualize it. My parents' behavior wasn't about my worth, it was about their dysfunction. This understanding freed me to build a life based on healthier principles. By 26, I had saved enough for a down payment on a small condo in Cambridge. The day I signed those papers was one of the proudest moments of my life. After being thrown away by the people who should have protected me, I had created safety for myself. The walls of that condo represented more than property ownership. They were a fortress I had built with my own determination. Through occasional updates from distant relatives, I learned that my father's construction business was thriving, that my parents had renovated their house, that they were active in their church and community. They had apparently moved on completely, their eldest daughter erased from the family narrative. Sometimes this knowledge stung, but mostly I felt a detached sadness for what could have been. I couldn't have known then how dramatically our situations would reverse, or that the family that had discarded me would one day be looking to me for salvation. At 28, my career was thriving. I had moved from the educational software startup to a major tech company, where I was quickly promoted to senior software engineer. The financial stability I'd worked so hard for had finally arrived, allowing me to purchase a beautiful townhouse in a desirable Boston neighborhood with a view of the harbor. My personal life was blooming too. After years of focusing primarily on survival and career building, I had met Michael, a pediatrician with kind eyes and a patient demeanor. We'd been dating for 8 months, and I was cautiously optimistic about our future. He knew about my family situation and never pushed me to reconcile or forgive and forget as some previous partners had. Family is who treats you like family, he said once after I admitted feeling strange about not having parents to introduce him to. The people who show up for you, who respect your boundaries, who love you unconditionally. By that definition, your friends are your real family. It was on a Tuesday evening in April when the call came. I was making dinner music, playing softly in the background, thinking about the presentation I needed to finish for work. The number on my phone screen was unfamiliar with a Minneapolis area code. My heart skipped a beat. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Madison." My mother's voice, older and more tremulous than I remembered, came through the line. "Madison, is that you?" I hadn't heard that voice in 10 years. A tumult of emotions swept through me. Anger, hurt, curiosity, a stubborn flicker of longing. Yes, it's me. Kawati-san. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Oh, thank God, I wasn't sure this number would still work. Your email changed. Mum, why are you calling after all this time? I got straight to the point, unwilling to pretend this was a normal conversation between mother and daughter. There was a pause filled with the sound of her shaky breathing. We need your help, Madison. Your father, his business, everything's gone. I leaned against the kitchen counter, processing her words. What do you mean gone? The economy, the housing market crash. His company went under last year. We've been trying to stay afloat, but her voice broke. We lost the house last month. Foreclosure. We've been living in our car. The revelation was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't respond. My parents, who had owned the same stately colonial for over 30 years, who had built their identity around their standing in the community, were homeless. The irony was almost too perfect. They had thrown me out, left me to fend for myself at 18, and now they were the ones without a roof over their heads. Madison, are you still there? I'm here. I took a deep breath. Where's Dad now? He's at the library, using the computer to look for jobs. He doesn't know I'm calling you. His pride. She trailed off. Of course. Thomas Walker's pride. The force that had shaped our family dynamic, that had made reconciliation impossible, that had cost him his relationship with his daughter. And now apparently it was preventing him from reaching out for help even in dire circumstances. So he still doesn't think he did anything wrong, I stated flatly. Madison, please. We've lost everything. I know we hurt you terribly. I've regretted it every day. I should have stood up to your father. I should have supported you. Her voice cracked with genuine emotion. I'm so sorry. More sorry than you can ever know. A part of me wanted to hang up, to let them experience even a fraction of the abandonment and fear I had felt at 18. But another part, the part that had worked so hard to build a life based on better values than I'd been raised with, couldn't do it. Where are you staying tonight? I asked. We found a cheap motel for a few days. After that, I don't know. I closed my eyes, weighing my options. I can help with temporary housing, and maybe some job leads for Dad. But Mom, I need you to understand something. This doesn't erase the past. This doesn't mean I'm ready to play happy family. I understand, she said quickly. Anything you can do, we're grateful. So grateful. After getting the details of their situation and promising to call back with a plan, I ended the call and sank onto my kitchen floor phone, still clutched in my hand. Emotions battled within me. Vindication that my father's rigid worldview had finally failed him, pity for my mother, who had always been too weak to stand up for herself or her children, and a complicated, lingering love that family ties seemed to maintain despite everything. I called my therapist that evening and scheduled an emergency session for the next day. You're not obligated to help them, Dr. Chen reminded me during our session. After what they did, no one would blame you for keeping your distance. I know, but I don't want to be the person who turns away family in need, even if they did exactly that to me. I twisted a tissue in my hands. Does that make me weak? It makes you compassionate, Madison. But compassion needs boundaries to be healthy. You can offer assistance without sacrificing the life and boundaries you've built. We spent the rest of the session outlining what those boundaries might look like. Financial help that didn't strain my resources. Emotional distance that protected my well-being. Clear expectations about the future of our relationship. Armed with this plan, I called my mother back. I offered to pay for a month's stay in an extended stay hotel while they got back on their feet. I mentioned that my company had connections with construction firms in the Minneapolis area that might have job openings for someone with my father's experience. I made it clear that this help came with no strings attached. I wasn't looking to re-establish the unhealthy family dynamic that had existed before. Your father will need to hear this directly from you, my mother said hesitantly. He's not the same man, Madison. Losing everything has changed him. I doubted that. In my experience, people like my father didn't fundamentally change, even when faced with consequences of their actions. But I agreed to a meeting on neutral ground when they felt ready. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was no joy in their downfall, despite the poetic justice of it. Instead, I felt a quiet confidence in my own strength. 10 years ago, they had cast me adrift, believing I would fail without their support. Now I was the one extending a lifeline from the solid ground I'd built for myself. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain: I was no longer the frightened 18-year-old desperate for their approval. I was Madison Walker, self-made and whole, offering help, not from obligation, but from choice. And that made all the difference. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between their extended stay hotel and my home. I arrived early, securing a corner table with some privacy, my stomach knotted with anxiety despite my outward composure. When they walked through the door, I almost didn't recognize them. My father, once tall and commanding, with an air of unquestionable authority, now looked diminished. His shoulders hunched slightly, his hair completely grey, his face lined with worry. He'd lost weight, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. My mother seemed to have aged even more dramatically, her once smooth face now deeply creased her movements, hesitant and bird-like. They spotted me and paused, uncertainty flashing across both their faces. I raised a hand in acknowledgement and they made their way over. There was an awkward moment where none of us knew how to greet each other after 10 years of separation. No hugs were exchanged, just stilted nods and murmured hellos. "You look well, Madison," my mother said as they sat down. "Beautiful. Thank you," I replied, then turned to my father. "How are you, Dad?" He cleared his throat, eyes darting around before settling somewhere over my shoulder. "Been better," he admitted gruffly. The waitress came by, breaking the tension momentarily as we ordered coffee. When she left, silence fell again, heavy with a decade of unspoken words. "I've arranged for a month's stay at the hotel," I said, taking control of the conversation. "And I've reached out to some industry contacts about potential job opportunities." "We appreciate that," my mother said quickly. "Don't we, Thomas?" My father nodded stiffly. "Yes, it's very generous of you." The formal politeness between us felt surreal, as if we were strangers conducting a business transaction rather than family. "I need to understand what happened," I said. "With the business, the house, everything." My father's jaw tightened, but he answered. "The housing market took a hit. Projects fell through. Clients couldn't pay. I tried to keep things afloat by taking out loans using the house as collateral." He shook his head. "Thought it would turn around. It didn't." "We should have seen it coming," my mother added. "Started downsizing sooner, but your father believed things would improve." I nodded, understanding the combination of market forces and my father's stubborn pride that had led to their downfall. And no family or friends could help. My mother looked down at her hands. "We kept our problems private for too long. By the time people realized how bad things were, it was already too late. And many of our friends have had financial struggles of their own in recent years." The waitress returned with our coffees. I watched as my father added sugar to his with slightly trembling hands. "Madison," he said finally, looking directly at me for the first time. "Your mother tells me you're doing well. Senior position at a tech company. Your own home." "Yes," I confirmed. "I've been fortunate in my career." A flash of something, pride, regret, crossed his face. "You always were smart, determined." The compliment so long withheld felt both satisfying and hollow. "I had to be," I said evenly. When I was cut off without warning, I had no choice but to figure things out on my own. My father flinched slightly. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "What you did," I continued, my voice calm, despite the emotions churning beneath, throwing me out based on a lie, cancelling my tuition, without notice, telling everyone in our community that I had somehow corrupted Amber. It was cruel and unjust. I was 18 years old, and you left me to sink or swim entirely on my own. "Madison," my mother began, but I held up a hand. "I need to say this. For 10 years I've carried this. I worked multiple jobs while taking a full course load. I went into debt. I spent holidays with friends' families because I didn't have one of my own anymore. All because of a lie Amber told in a moment of panic, and because Dad couldn't handle me making my own choices about my education." My father's face had reddened, but he remained silent, eyes now fixed on his coffee cup. "Amber told us the truth," my mother said quietly. "About 6 months after everything. She admitted she'd lied about you knowing about her boyfriend." "And did that change anything? Did you call me, email me, try to make amends?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Your father felt that you had still abandoned the family by choosing to go so far away to school, that the damage was done." She glanced at him nervously. "I should have fought harder for you. I'll regret that until the day I die." My father cleared his throat. "I was harsh, too harsh." The admission seemed physically painful for him. "My generation, my upbringing, family stuck together. When you left, it felt like rejection." "I wanted an education, Dad. I wasn't rejecting you or the family. I was pursuing my dreams." I see that now, he said, surprising me. Seeing what you've built for yourself, it's impressive. You were right to go. I was wrong to stand in your way. I took you. The words I'd waited so long to hear left me momentarily speechless. Before I could respond, he continued. We've been thinking, your mother and I. Once I find work again, get back on my feet. Perhaps we could move in with you, start fresh as a family. Your house must have spare rooms and we could help with upkeep cooking. And there it was, the real reason for this newfound humility. Not genuine remorse, but necessity. They needed somewhere to live and my success made me a convenient solution. No, I said firmly. That's not going to happen. My father's expression hardened. After everything we did for you growing up, everything you did for me, I interrupted incredulous. You disowned me, cut me off completely, left me to struggle alone for 10 years, and now you think you can just move into my home. We're family, he insisted, the old authoritarian tone creeping back. Family takes care of each other. That's rich coming from you. I said, my calm facade cracking slightly. Where was that family loyalty when I needed it most? Madison, my mother interjected, what your father means is that we've learned our lesson. We know we handled everything terribly. We just want a chance to be part of your life again. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm willing to help you get back on your feet. I'll pay for temporary housing, help Dad find work if I can. But you will not be living with me. That's not on the table. Then what is? My father demanded, frustration evident. What do you want from us? Nothing, I said simply. I don't need anything from you anymore. I'm helping because it's the right thing to do, not because I expect something in return. But my home is my safe space built after years of struggle that you caused. I won't compromise that. My father opened his mouth to argue, but my mother placed a restraining hand on his arm. We understand, she said, though it was clear my father didn't. We're grateful for whatever help you're willing to provide. As the conversation shifted to practical matters of job searches and housing options, I mentioned casually, have you been in touch with Amber recently? A strange look passed between my parents. Not for some time, my mother admitted. She lives in San Diego now, has 2 children. She stopped speaking to us about 3 years ago. My father added, his voice gruff with hurt. Said she needed space, that our relationship was, what was the word she used, Karen? Toxic. My mother supplied quietly. I couldn't help the small bitter laugh that escaped me. So Amber finally saw it too. Saw what? My father demanded. The control, the conditional love, the way you used approval and financial support as weapons. I shook my head. I'm not surprised she eventually needed distance too. My father's face flushed with anger, but something else flickered in his eyes. Doubt, perhaps even the beginnings of genuine self-reflection. For the first time, I saw him consider that perhaps the common denominator in his failed relationships with both daughters was himself. I did what I thought was right, he said finally, his voice softer than before. What my father would have done. I thought that was what being a good parent meant. And look where it got us all, I replied, not unkindly. 2 daughters who had to create distance to survive. You and Mom living in your car. Everyone isolated and hurting. Tears filled his eyes, shocking me. In 28 years, I had never seen my father cry. I've lost everything, he whispered. My business, my home, my daughters, my standing in the community, everything I worked for, gone. My mother reached for his hand, her own eyes wet. I sat watching this display of vulnerability, feeling oddly detached. The man breaking down before me seemed like a stranger, not the towering figure who had ruled my childhood with an iron will. You haven't lost everything, I said finally. You're still here. You have options. You can rebuild. I paused, then added, I did. He looked up at me, really seeing me, perhaps for the first time in my adult life. Yes, he acknowledged. You did. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, arrangements made for job interviews and continued temporary housing, my father hesitated, then asked, would it be possible, perhaps, to meet again, not to ask for anything more, just to talk? I considered the request carefully. I think that might be possible, not right away, but eventually. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a door left slightly ajar where before there had been only walls. Yeah. Over the next few months, I helped my parents find their footing again. Through my professional network, my father secured a position as a construction project manager at a firm in Minneapolis. Not the owner role he was accustomed to, but stable employment with a decent salary. I helped them secure a modest 2-bedroom apartment with an affordable lease, paying the security deposit and first 2 months' rent to get them established. Throughout this process, I maintained careful boundaries. Our interactions remained cordial but distant. I spoke with them by phone once a week, kept conversations focused on practical matters, and deflected when my mother made tentative suggestions about visiting Boston or having me return to Minneapolis for holidays. Michael supported me through it all, never judging my complex feelings about my family. "You're handling this with incredible grace," he told me one evening as I hung up from yet another tense call with my father. "Many people would have slammed the door in their faces after what they did to you." "Sometimes I'm tempted," I admitted, especially when Dad reverts to his old authoritarian tone or makes comments about how things would be easier if I'd just let them move in with me. "But you don't slam the door. You maintain your boundaries while still offering help. That takes strength." His words reminded me how far I'd come from the frightened, abandoned teenager I once was. The girl who would have done anything for her parents' approval was gone, replaced by a woman who understood her own worth, independent of their validation. 6 months after that first coffee shop meeting, I received an unexpected call from a California number I didn't recognize. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Madison, it's Amber, your sister." The voice was familiar yet different, more mature than I remembered, but unmistakably Amber. "Amber," I breathed. "How are you? How did you get my number?" "Mom gave it to me. Hope that's okay." She sounded nervous. "I've been wanting to call for years, but I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me after what I did." "It's been a long time," I said neutrally, unsure how I felt about this sudden reconnection. "Too long," she agreed. "Madison, I can't even begin to apologize for what happened. The lie I told, what it cost you. I was young and terrified, but that's no excuse." "No, it's not," I agreed. "But we were both trapped in Dad's control system. You did what you thought you had to do to survive it." "That's generous of you." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've been in therapy for the past 4 years, working through all the family stuff. That's why I finally cut contact with Mom and Dad. I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal when it was so dysfunctional. I heard about that. They told me when we reconnected recently. Yeah, Mom mentioned they'd reached out to you, that things got bad for them financially." She paused. "She also said you helped them. After everything they did, you still helped." "I'm not them," I said simply. "No, you're not." The admiration in her voice was evident. "You're the one who got away, who built something healthy. I've been trying to do the same, but it's a process." We talked for nearly 2 hours. Amber told me about her life in San Diego, her husband Ryan, their 2 young children. She was working as a graphic designer, having discovered her artistic talents in college. She shared how giving her baby up for adoption at 16 had haunted her, how she'd reconnected with her daughter recently through an open adoption arrangement. She's 12 now. Her name is Lily. Her adoptive parents are wonderful people who've given her a great life. Better than I could have at 16, that's for sure. I told her about my career, my home Michael. We carefully navigated the decade of separation, acknowledging the pain without dwelling on it. By the end of the call, something had shifted between us. Not quite the sisterly closeness we might have had under different circumstances, but a fragile new connection based on shared history and mutual understanding of the damage our upbringing had caused. "I'd like to see you sometime," Amber said, as we prepared to hang up. "Maybe I could visit Boston, or you could come to San Diego, meet Ryan and the kids." "I'd like that." I realized I meant it. The idea of rebuilding some kind of relationship with my sister felt healing in a way that reconnecting with my parents hadn't. Perhaps because Amber had also been a victim of our father's controlling nature, had also found the strength to break free, had also done the work to understand the dysfunction we'd been raised in. That Thanksgiving, I made a bold decision. I invited my parents Amber and her family and Michael to a holiday dinner at my home. Not out of obligation or a naive belief that all wounds had healed, but as a deliberate step toward creating a new type of family connection, one based on adult relationships and clear boundaries, rather than old power dynamics. The dinner was awkward at times. My father still struggled with his diminished status, occasionally making tone-deaf comments that revealed his difficulty adapting to our new reality. My mother fussed nervously, trying too hard to please everyone. Amber and I shared knowing glances when familiar patterns emerged, supporting each other silently. After dinner, as everyone gathered in the living room, my father approached me in the kitchen where I was preparing coffee. "Your home is beautiful," he said, looking around the modern space I'd designed myself. "You've done well for yourself, Madison, better than I would have predicted." Thank you, I replied, hearing both the compliment and its limitations. I've been thinking a lot about the past, he continued, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, about the kind of father I was, the kind of man I was. I waited, giving him space to continue. I believed I was doing the right thing, following the example my own father set, maintaining discipline and respect. He shook his head. But looking at you and Amber now, both successful, both had to distance yourselves from me to thrive, I can't avoid the conclusion that I failed as a father in fundamental ways. The admission hung in the air between us. Not a full accounting of all he'd done wrong, not a complete apology for the specific pain he'd caused, but still the most self-awareness I'd ever witnessed from him. I can't change the past, he continued, but I'm trying to be different now, to listen more, to control less. He met my eyes directly. I don't expect forgiveness, Madison, but I hope with time we might find some way to be family again, on new terms. Okay, bye then. I considered his words carefully. I've learned something important over the years, Dad. Forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about freeing myself from being controlled by that hurt. I handed him a cup of coffee. I'm working on forgiving you, but it's a process, and it doesn't mean forgetting or allowing the same patterns to repeat. He nodded, accepting both the coffee and my terms. That seems fair. As we rejoined the others, I observed the strange collection of people in my living room. My once authoritarian father now humbled by circumstance. My mother finding her voice in small ways after decades of deference. My sister, who had thrown me under the bus out of self-preservation, but had grown into a thoughtful woman capable of genuine remorse and change. Michael, who loved me not despite my complicated family history, but with full awareness of how it had shaped me into the person I was. We weren't a conventional family, and we never would be. The damage done couldn't be erased entirely, but sitting there watching my father actually listen to Amber's husband describe their children's school activities, seeing my mother engage Michael in genuine conversation about his pediatric practice, I felt something unexpected hope. Not for a perfect family reunion or a storybook reconciliation, but for a new kind of relationship. One built on adult interactions rather than parent-child dynamics. One where boundaries were respected and past hurts acknowledged rather than swept under the rug. One where forgiveness was possible without forgetting. In helping my parents when they had nowhere else to turn, I hadn't just extended financial assistance. I demonstrated to myself and to them that I was not defined by their treatment of me. That I could choose compassion without compromising my self-respect. That I could selectively forgive without allowing myself to become vulnerable to the same patterns of control and conditional love that had marked my childhood. The home I built wasn't just brick and mortar, but a monument to my own strength. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean allowing people back into positions where they can hurt you again. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do, both for yourself and for those who wronged you, is to love from a distance, maintaining the boundaries that keep your heart safe while still extending a helping hand. After all, the family we choose often heals the wounds left by the family we were born into. As I look back on the journey from that devastating phone call in my college dorm to the life I've built today, I'm amazed by how far I've come. The path wasn't easy, but it was mine. Every obstacle my parents placed in my way ultimately became a stepping stone to greater independence and resilience. My wedding day last spring was a powerful symbol of this new chapter. Michael and I decided on a small ceremony by the harbour, with only our closest friends and family present. I invited my parents, but with specific boundaries in place. My father would not be walking me down the aisle. That honour went to Professor Jenkins from MIT, who had mentored me through my darkest days. My mother would not be involved in the planning. My chosen family of friends helped with those details. The morning of the wedding, my father asked to speak with me privately before the ceremony. I need to say something. He began, more emotional than I'd ever seen him. Something I should have said years ago. I waited, wedding dress rustling softly as I sat across from him. I was wrong, completely wrong in how I treated you. His voice broke. The control, the punishment, the rejection, all of it. I was a prideful, stubborn man who couldn't see that my daughter's independence wasn't a threat. It was a gift, evidence of her strength. Tears filled my eyes, unexpected emotion welling up at this full acknowledgement. So different from his earlier partial admissions. I lost years with you, Madison. Years I can never get back. And it was entirely my fault. He reached for my hand hesitantly. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I see you now. I see the amazing woman you've become, not despite my failures, but because you had the courage to defy them. In that moment, something shifted between us. Not a complete healing, some wounds go too deep for that, but a genuine recognition of truth that made space for something new to grow. Amber served as my maid of honor, our sisterhood rebuilt on more equal footing than before. During her toast, she spoke about resilience and second chances, her words resonating with everyone who knew our story. My sister taught me that we are not defined by the worst things that happen to us, or even by the worst things we've done, she said, meeting my eyes across the room. We are defined by how we choose to rebuild. In the years since my parents' financial collapse, they've created a more modest but stable life. My father adapted to working for someone else, learning humility in the process. My mother found her voice taking a part-time job at a local library and developing interests independent of my father for the first time in their marriage. They will never be the parents I needed as a child, but they're trying to be better parents to the adult I've become. We've even established new family traditions, Thanksgiving at my home, summer visits to Amber in California, on my terms with clear boundaries that everyone respects. The power dynamic has fundamentally changed. My parents no longer dictate the terms of our relationship. We engage as adults with mutual respect. The circle widened further when Amber facilitated a meeting with Lily, the daughter she gave up for adoption. Now a thoughtful teenager, Lily has become part of our extended family network, connecting with Amber's younger children as their half-sister. What began as a family tragedy, a pregnant 16-year-old and the chaos that followed, has evolved into a complex but loving extended family arrangement that prioritizes Lily's well-being. My career continues to flourish. I was recently promoted to technical director at my company, overseeing a team of engineers and developing products that make a difference in people's lives. The financial security I fought so hard for allows me to help others now, contributing to scholarship funds for students who, like me, found themselves suddenly without family support. My therapy group for family estrangement and reconciliation has become an important part of my healing journey. Sharing experiences with others who understand the complex emotions involved helps me process lingering pain and celebrate progress. Through these connections, I've gained perspective on my parents' growth. Their change isn't perfect or complete, but it's genuine, prompted initially by necessity but sustained by a growing recognition of past mistakes. Michael and I are discussing starting our own family soon. The prospect both excites and terrifies me. Will I know how to be a good parent without healthy models to follow? But then I remember that parenting, like everything else in life, is something I can learn, something I can approach with the same determination that got me through everything else. You'll be an amazing mother, Michael tells me. Not because your parents showed you how, but because they showed you what not to do. You know the value of unconditional love because you had to find it elsewhere. He's right. The greatest gift of this difficult journey has been clarity about what matters: love that doesn't depend on compliance, support that doesn't come with strings attached, forgiveness that doesn't require forgetting. On difficult days when old hurts resurface or family gatherings become tense, I lean on the support system that carried me through the worst times. Jasmine, now a physics professor, still makes me laugh when I take myself too seriously. Raj, who became a successful engineer in California, checks in regularly with thoughtful messages. David, whose family offered me holiday refuge, and his wife are godparents to Amber's youngest child. A beautiful connecting of the different chapters of our lives. The journey from rejection to reconciliation taught me that forgiveness is not a single moment but a process. Some days it comes easily, others it feels impossible. The important thing is that it's my choice now, not something demanded of me, not a prerequisite for being worthy of love. I choose to forgive my parents not to free them from the consequences of their actions, but to free myself from being defined by what they did. I choose to maintain boundaries not as punishment, but as protection for the life I've worked so hard to build. I choose to allow them into my life in measured ways, not out of obligation, but because there is value in healing what can be healed. The scared 18-year-old who once cried herself to sleep in a college dorm room abandoned by the people who should have protected her has become a woman who protects herself. Who knows her worth isn't determined by anyone else's assessment. Who understands that family, true family, is defined by love, respect, and mutual support, not merely by blood. If you're struggling with family trauma or rejection, know that you can build something beautiful from the broken pieces. Your worth isn't diminished by others' failure to see it. Healing doesn't mean pretending you weren't hurt. It means finding the strength to prevent that hurt from defining your future. And forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it simply means releasing yourself from the weight of someone else's mistakes. Have you ever had to forgive someone who deeply hurt you? How did you handle it? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if this resonated with you. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is share our stories and let others know they're not alone in their struggles. Thank you for listening to mine, and remember, the family that matters most is the one that treats you with love and respect, whether they're related by blood or by choice.